My name is Rachel. I was 34 years old when my world shattered in a single week. My husband Daniel, the man I had shared 11 years of my life with, was suddenly gone. A brain aneurysm took him one ordinary morning, leaving me staring at an empty side of the bed that still smelled like his cologne. Just 3 days after the funeral, while my body was still numb from exhaustion and grief, I forced myself to attend my nephew's first birthday party. I thought it would be a small family gathering. Cake balloons, polite smiles to cover the ache inside my chest. I never expected the gathering to turn into an ambush. When I stepped into the backyard filled with strangers and awkward whispers, I already felt the weight of eyes on me. My parents sat stiff at a picnic table, avoiding my gaze. And then my younger sister Emily walked out holding her son Leo in her arms, dressed in a new dress, her hair freshly highlighted as if she was arriving at a show rather than her child's birthday. She tapped her spoon against a plastic cup, calling for attention. "Thank you for being here," she said loudly, her voice clear and rehearsed. "There's something I can't hide anymore. Leo is not Tyler's son. He is Daniel's." And before Daniel passed, he made sure to update his will. Half of Rachel's house, valued at $800,000, belongs to my child. For a moment, time stopped. Gasps rose from the crowd. My father half stood, unsure whether to intervene. I heard the shock ripple through whispers, eyes darting back and forth between me and Emily, waiting for my explosion of grief, anger, or denial. But none of that came. Instead, I felt a strange calmness, almost like a laugh bubbling under my ribs. Because unlike everyone else, I knew something Emily could never imagine. Something that turned her performance into a farce. Daniel had always been one step ahead, and I carried a secret she could not erase. The scene at the party was almost surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unravel on a stage. My sister's voice trembled only slightly, but her eyes sparkled with triumph. She believed she had cornered me, that in front of dozens of witnesses she had cemented her story. But the only thing I felt was the absurdity of it all. I could see my mother lowering her gaze to the ground, my father shifting nervously. Friends and acquaintances stared, unsure whether to pity me or relish the scandal. Emily placed the folded document on the table beside the cake, lifting her chin as if she had delivered divine justice. I took a deep breath. My hand shook slightly, but not from fear, from restraint, because all I wanted was to laugh at the audacity. Yet I swallowed the urge. In that moment, standing in a backyard filled with balloons and false smiles, I realized something powerful. This was not just Emily's attempt to steal what I had left of Daniel. This was the moment where the truth I had carried quietly for years would protect me. What she did not know, what no one in that yard knew, was that Daniel and I had already faced the shadow of her manipulations long before, and he had prepared for it meticulously. The trap she thought she had set was nothing more than a mirror waiting to expose her. So instead of rage, I leaned back, folded my arms, and smiled. Not a smile of joy, but one that carried the weight of certainty. Emily thought she had broken me. She had no idea she had just stepped onto the edge of her own downfall. This was only the beginning. The backyard was silent after Emily's announcement. Cups of soda hung frozen halfway to lips. My parents looked like they had swallowed glass. For a heartbeat, I thought someone would scream, maybe rush to comfort me. But no one moved. Everyone stared at me, waiting. I remember the way the late afternoon sun caught the edge of the balloons, casting their shadows across the grass. Children giggled in the distance, oblivious to the tension pressing down on the adults. It was surreal, like the party had split in two, innocence on one side, betrayal on the other. Emily clutched the so-called will like it was her golden ticket. Her eyes locked on mine, daring me to deny her. She expected me to break, to collapse under the weight of grief and scandal. That was her play, to make me the widow and the fool all at once. But instead of tears, I felt something unexpected. A smile tugged at my lips. Not from joy, but from the ridiculousness of it all. The document in her hand was a joke. Her confidence was a mask stretched too tight. I knew the truth, and for the first time since Daniel's death, I felt a strange spark of control. "Is that all?" I finally asked, my voice calm. The crowd shifted. Whispers rippled. Emily faltered just for a moment, then straightened again. "Yes," she said, "that's all, for now." I glanced at the paper she was waving, but I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I could already tell, even from a distance, that it wasn't worth the ink it was printed with. Inside my chest, my heart was hammering. Not from fear, but from restraint. I wanted to laugh in her face, to call her out in front of every guest, but I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about me, this was about Daniel, about the life we built, the promises he made, and the quiet preparations he left behind. Emily thought she had me cornered. She had no idea that Daniel had seen her coming years ago. I excused myself politely as if I had heard nothing more than a boring speech. "Thank you for sharing," I said softly. "We'll discuss this later." My parents blinked at me in shock. The guests stared, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't give Emily the satisfaction. I walked away slowly, each step steady, controlled. Inside I was burning, but not with despair, with determination. Because here's the truth. Secrets are heavy, but sometimes they save you. Daniel had left me with something Emily didn't know. A shield crafted out of foresight and love. And soon her lies would unravel in front of everyone. As I slipped into my car and shut the door, the laughter I had held back finally burst free. It wasn't happy laughter, it was wild, incredulous. The kind that comes when pain and absurdity collide. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept laughing until my chest hurt. Emily thought she had stolen my life. She had no idea her performance was built on sand. Because 2 years before her son was even born, Daniel made a decision that changed everything. He had undergone surgery, a vasectomy, documented, undeniable, irreversible, which meant Emily's claim wasn't just cruel, it was biologically impossible. And that wasn't all. He had also left behind a trail of records, a legitimate will, and a journal that told the real story of Emily's obsession. The irony was bitter, but it gave me strength. I wasn't just a grieving widow. I was a woman standing on the edge of a battlefield, holding weapons my sister didn't know existed. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers unraveling. And before I take you deeper into the storm, let me ask you, have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted? Share your experience in the comments. It helps more than you think when we realize we're not alone in family betrayals. And if you want to walk through this story with me, make sure you subscribe. There's so much more to uncover. Long before that backyard spectacle, there was a night that changed everything for me. A night when Daniel first walked into my life. I can still see it as clearly as if it were yesterday. I was 22, volunteering at a charity auction for children with cancer. My job was simple: arrange silent bids, collect donations, smile for the cameras when necessary. I remember hovering near a watercolor painting of the Boston skyline, the colors bleeding together in shades of orange and purple. I couldn't stop looking at it. Something about the way the harbor reflected the sky felt like hope. When the bidding began, I watched quietly from the sidelines, never intending to take part. My savings account barely covered rent back then. But Daniel noticed. He was already a young attorney dressed in a tailored suit, confident, but not arrogant. He kept raising his bid until he outbid everyone in the room. And when the auctioneer announced him as the winner, he didn't keep the painting. He walked straight over to me. "I noticed you couldn't stop looking at this," he said. His smile reached his blue eyes, crinkling them at the corners. "I think it belongs with you." That moment, it disarmed me completely. I felt like he had seen through the crowd, through the chaos, straight into me. We went on our first date the very next night. Dinner turned into a walk along the harbor, laughter that didn't feel forced, stories that felt like confessions to an old friend rather than a stranger. I knew then this was different. 8 months later, he proposed. Right there by the harbor again, with the skyline reflecting off the water, just like the painting that had brought us together. It was poetic, almost unreal. But that was Daniel, thoughtful, intentional. The kind of man who didn't just love with words, but with actions. We bought a Victorian house in Beacon Hill after our first anniversary. It was $800,000, a terrifying number back then. But Daniel had just made partner at his firm, and I was starting to establish myself as an interior designer. The house needed work, but it had bones we both believed, in high ceilings, creaky floors, and a garden out back. I imagined children playing there. He imagined grilling on summer nights. We thought we had time. We thought we had forever. Looking back now, I see how much he built into every gesture, how much care he gave to the smallest details. When the IVF cycles failed, when the doctors told us there would be no children, I thought it was the end of our dream. But Daniel held my hand on the drive home and whispered, "You and me. That's enough." And he meant it. We poured our love into other things. Travel. Renovating the house room by room until it became a showcase. Supporting each other's careers. It wasn't the life we had planned, but it was still beautiful. And through it all, Emily hovered. She was always there, my younger sister, the one our parents worried about, the one they excused. While I was building a business, she was hopping between jobs and relationships. While Daniel was becoming a respected attorney, she was crashing on couches, fishing for money from mom and dad. She was beautiful, yes, and she knew it. She used it. And there was always competition in her eyes when she looked at me. At first I brushed it off. She was my sister after all. And Daniel, ever the peacemaker, would remind me, she's your only sister. Family matters. So I tried. I tolerated the digs, the jealousy, the way she suddenly showed interest in law students after I started dating Daniel, or how she complained about her apartment when we bought our house. It was exhausting, but I swallowed it. What I didn't know then was that Emily's envy wasn't just background noise. It was a seed. And seeds, given enough time, grow into something far more dangerous. Oh, have you ever had someone in your family who couldn't stand to see you happy? If you relate to that silent competition, drop a comment. Sharing helps others know they're not alone. And if you're still here with me, subscribe. You'll want to hear how this seed of jealousy grew into betrayal. The house we bought was not perfect when we first stepped inside, but Daniel squeezed my hand and whispered, "It has potential." I believed him. We had stretched ourselves thin to afford it $800,000, but it felt like an investment in our future. Every crack in the wall, every creak in the stairs, every peeling layer of paint was a promise we would rebuild it together. The house became our canvas. On weekends, we painted walls, tore out old carpet, and scrubbed floors until our knuckles ached. I designed the rooms like they were clients' projects, except this time every decision carried pieces of our hearts. Daniel insisted on a large wooden desk in the study, where he planned to write briefs late into the night. I wanted a kitchen filled with light where the scent of rosemary and garlic could linger for hours. But more than anything, there was the garden. It was a small patch of earth, but I saw children running barefoot across the grass. I imagined birthday parties with balloons tied to the fence, Daniel chasing little ones around with sparklers in the summer dusk. It was that dream that kept us pushing through the renovations. But dreams have a way of breaking. We started trying for a baby almost immediately after the wedding. At first it was fun, hopeful. Each month carried expectation, but soon each month carried disappointment. Then came the doctors, the tests, the needles, the waiting rooms filled with couples wearing the same weary hope. We went through 4 rounds of IVF, 4 rounds of hormone injections, invasive procedures, endless appointments. 4 rounds of watching savings drain away, along with pieces of our spirits. I will never forget the silence after our last attempt failed. The drive home was wordless, the world outside the car window blurring into gray. My hands clenched the seatbelt, my chest heavy with defeat. Then Daniel reached across the console, took my hand, and said the words that changed everything. "We can still have a beautiful life. You and me. That's enough." That night, sitting together on the porch swing, I finally let the tears come. Daniel held me, rocking gently, as if to remind me the world was still moving. He meant it. He didn't see me as broken. He didn't see us as less. He saw a future where our love itself was enough. So we shifted. We rebuilt our dream. Instead of saving for fertility treatments, we saved for trips. Paris, Rome, the Grand Canyon. Instead of buying toys for children who never came, we bought paint, tile, and furniture for the house. Slowly, it transformed into a masterpiece, our masterpiece. I launched my own interior design firm during that time. Daniel cheered the loudest when I got my first client. He even volunteered to carry samples and hang curtains when I was short on help. Our home became my portfolio, a living showcase of what I could do. For a while, I thought we had finally reached peace. Our lives weren't what we had planned, but they were still good. We had each other. We had the house. We had laughter. But looking back now, I realized something haunting. While we were fighting for joy, Emily was circling. Her life was chaos, short-term jobs, unstable relationships, but every time she saw me happy, I could see the flicker in her eyes. That need to tear it down. The house that Daniel and I built together became a symbol not just of our resilience, but of her resentment. And years later, it would become the very thing she tried to steal from me. Have you ever poured your soul into building something only to watch someone else try to claim it? If you know that ache, share your story in the comments. And if you want to follow this journey, this battle over love, loss, and truth, make sure to subscribe. What comes next is where the cracks in family ties start to split wide open. Every family has a wild one, the child who never quite fits the mold, who seems to live in a storm of their own making. In my family, that was Emily, 4 years younger than me. She grew up with charm that pulled people in effortlessly. Teachers overlooked her missed assignments. Friends forgave her broken promises. And my parents? They excused everything. While I studied design and worked late nights building a career, Emily floated from job to job, boyfriend to boyfriend. When rent came due and her paycheck wasn't enough, my parents bailed her out. When she crashed her car, they co-signed a loan for another. They always said she just needed time or she'll find her way. What they didn't see, or maybe chose not to, was the competition brewing beneath her pretty smiles. If I won an award at school, she found a way to upstage me at home. If I got into a prestigious program, she suddenly considered applying to something similar, though she rarely followed through. That constant shadow of rivalry followed us into adulthood. When I started dating Daniel, the tension sharpened. He was everything she wasn't attracting: stable, ambitious, grounded. Suddenly, Emily began hanging around law students, pretending to be fascinated by their cases. When Daniel and I bought our Beacon Hill house, she moaned about her cramped apartment for months, fishing for our parents to help her upgrade. At first, I tried to dismiss it as sibling jealousy. Daniel would remind me, "She's your only sister. Family matters." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. So I tolerated her digs, her side comments, her constant need to be noticed. But as time passed, I began to sense something deeper. It wasn't just rivalry, it was hunger, a gnawing need in Emily to have what wasn't hers. I can still picture the Thanksgiving when it became obvious. Daniel and I had just announced we were starting my interior design firm. Our parents congratulated me, proud of how far I'd come. Emily, sitting across the table, gave a tight smile. Later that night, she cornered me in the kitchen and whispered, "You always get everything. The house, the career, the husband. When's it my turn?" Her tone wasn't playful, it was sharp, envious, and for the first time I felt a flicker of fear. The irony is that while I was working myself to exhaustion, Emily was burning through opportunities. She was beautiful, yes. People flocked to her at first glance. But beauty fades when paired with irresponsibility. She cycled through bartending, retail, temp jobs. Nothing stuck. Nothing lasted. And our parents kept rescuing her, every time. Each bailout reinforcing her belief that she didn't need to face consequences. That someone, mom, dad, maybe even me, would clean up the mess. But Daniel saw it clearly. "You have to protect yourself," he told me one night after Emily had borrowed money again and never repaid it. "You can't let her chaos become your burden." I wish I had listened more carefully then, because Daniel wasn't just talking about money. He was talking about the storm Emily carried inside her. The storm that would one day crash directly into us. What I didn't realize at the time was that every glance she cast at my life wasn't just jealousy. It was calculation. Watching. Waiting. Searching for the moment to strike. Have you ever had someone close to you who seemed to resent every bit of your happiness? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read them all. And if this story has hooked you so far, subscribe now. Because what happens when Emily announces a pregnancy will change everything. The announcement came out of nowhere. It was Thanksgiving, a year before Daniel's death. The table was crowded with dishes, turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and the sound of clinking forks filled the silence between conversations. Emily cleared her throat dramatically, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "I have news," she said, her voice trembling just enough to draw everyone's attention. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the room froze. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father blinked in shock. Then came the flood of congratulations, exclamations, hugs. Emily basked in it, the center of attention as always. I sat still, my fork heavy in my hand. My chest ached not from anger, but from the familiar sting of envy. Years of trying, of IVF injections, of hope rising and crashing, and now my younger sister, who had spent years mocking me for chasing some suburban dream, was suddenly carrying a child she hadn't even planned. Daniel reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I forced a smile, blinking away tears. "That's wonderful, Emily," I said. And in that moment, I decided I would be the best aunt possible. If I couldn't have children of my own, at least I could love hers. Her boyfriend Tyler, a bartender covered in tattoos, nodded awkwardly from the corner of the room. He looked uncomfortable, as though he hadn't signed up for the spotlight. Our parents didn't approve of him, they thought he was reckless, unstable. But Emily defended him fiercely, insisting he was misunderstood. Months later, when Leo was born, I was there. 8 pounds, 4 ounces, healthy, perfect. I brought flowers, knitted a blanket by hand, and held him with tears streaming down my face. For a while, I thought this baby might bring us closer as sisters. Maybe Emily would soften. Maybe she would finally see me as more than competition. But the reality was different. Emily was overwhelmed from the start. She called me constantly, midnight sobs about colic, early morning pleas for help so she could sleep. I stepped in, sometimes watching Leo overnight, sometimes spending hours at her apartment so she could shower or nap. I didn't resent it. In fact, I cherished those moments with him. I sang to him, rocked him to sleep, memorized the tiny curve of his fingers. Daniel, however, was distant. At the time, I thought it was because of our own infertility struggles. Maybe holding another child was too painful for him. He was always polite when Emily brought Leo over, but he kept his distance. I didn't press him. Grief has different shapes for each of us. Looking back now, I see it differently. That distance wasn't grief, it was instinct. Daniel already knew Emily's patterns too well. He had seen the glances, the comments, the subtle advances she had made toward him in the past, and he had already begun protecting himself from her and from the chaos she carried into every room. Still, I convinced myself this was family. That family meant sacrifice. So when Emily needed help, I showed up. When she looked exhausted, I held Leo while she slept. When she seemed disinterested, I became the one singing lullabies and wiping away tears. The irony is sharp now. I gave more of myself to that child than Emily did in his first months. I poured love into him, love I had saved for children of my own, and that love would one day make her betrayal cut even deeper. Because when Daniel died and Emily stepped forward with her claim, she wasn't just trying to steal my home. She was trying to rewrite the very bond I had built with her son. She wanted to erase my role as aunt, caregiver, protector, and replace it with a twisted lie that would give her leverage. But what she didn't count on was the truth Daniel had left behind. A truth that made her story impossible. If you've ever sacrificed for someone only to have them turn on you, you know the sting I felt. Tell me in the comments if you've lived that betrayal. And don't forget to subscribe, because what came next after Daniel's sudden death was the moment everything unraveled. The Tuesday Daniel died began like any other. He kissed me before leaving for work. His tie slightly crooked, his smile a little tired. Just a migraine, he said when I suggested he stay home. I'll call you after the meeting. I never got that call. Instead, the phone rang hours later with a voice I didn't recognize. Mrs. Carter, your husband has been brought to the hospital. You need to come immediately. By the time I arrived, Daniel was gone. A brain aneurysm had taken him in a flash, leaving no time for goodbyes, no chance for second words. He was 36. The days that followed blurred together, arrangements, paperwork, endless condolences that felt empty. People brought casseroles I couldn't eat. I wandered the house like a ghost, touching his desk, his shirts, his side of the bed. Every corner echoed with him, but he wasn't there. Emily was strangely absent through most of it. She sent short texts about Leo being sick or not finding a babysitter. When she did appear at the funeral, she kept to herself, whispering with friends before slipping out early. At the time, I was too numb to care. Grief consumed me. My world had collapsed. 1 week later came Leo's first birthday. My mother insisted I attend. Daniel always said family comes first, she reminded me. So against every instinct, I put on a black dress, forced a smile, and carried a wrapped gift into Emily's cramped rental house. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The air was thick, conversations, hushed strangers' eyes following me. In the backyard, balloons hung against the fence and a banner stretched across the wall, "Happy First Birthday, Leo." Children laughed, but adults glanced nervously at one another. My father hugged me with relief. "We weren't sure you'd come," he said. My mother avoided my eyes, fiddling with her napkin. Something was wrong, though I couldn't place it yet. Then Emily appeared. She was glowing in a new dress, her hair freshly highlighted. She carried Leo in her arms, who wore a tiny bow tie and button-up shirt, his legs kicking happily. Emily looked triumphant. She tapped her cup with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you for coming to celebrate Leo's special day," she began, her voice smooth. "This past year has been full of surprises and challenges, and there's something I can no longer keep hidden." My skin prickled. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced at my parents. My mother stared at her shoes. My father shifted uneasily. Leo, Emily said, placing her hand on his head, is not Tyler's son. He is Daniel's. The world stopped. Gasps erupted. My father stiffened beside me. Guests exchanged shocked glances. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear her next words. Daniel and I had a brief affair 2 years ago. It was a mistake, but these things happen. Before he passed, he updated his will to provide for Leo. Half of Rachel's house belongs to my child. She held up a folded document, her chin lifted in defiance. Every eye turned to me, pity, curiosity, discomfort. My parents looked stricken, frozen in disbelief. Inside, I felt laughter clawing its way up my throat. Not joy, not madness, something darker. Because what Emily didn't know, what none of them knew, was that her claim was impossible. Daniel had anticipated her games long before. He had left me with more than love. He had left me with protection. So I smiled, not kindly, not with humor, but with the calm of someone holding a secret weapon. Emily thought she had destroyed me. She had no idea she had just set the stage for her own downfall. What? Have you ever watched someone lie with such confidence that everyone almost believed them? Tell me below if you've lived that surreal moment. And if you're still with me, subscribe now. The truth that unraveled after this birthday party is something you won't forget. The yard was silent after Emily's announcement. Balloons swayed in the breeze, children clapped without understanding, and every adult stared at me. I could feel their eyes crawling over my skin, waiting for me to scream, to cry, to crumble. Emily stood tall in her new dress, holding up that folded document like a holy relic. She thought she had the perfect performance. The grieving widow exposed as the wife of a cheater. The baby declared the secret heir, and her, the triumphant sister, finally getting her share. But all I felt was the absurdity. I looked at my parents. My mother's face was pale, her eyes glued to the ground. My father sat frozen, one hand gripping the table as if it were an anchor. Guests whispered. Some avoided my gaze. Others leaned in hungry for drama. The weight of pity pressed down on me, but I refused to let it smother me. May I see the will? I asked calmly. My voice didn't tremble. That alone seemed to confuse Emily. She hesitated, then strutted forward and handed me the paper. I unfolded it slowly, scanning the typewritten lines. Even at a glance, it was laughable. The language was clumsy, nothing like the meticulous contracts Daniel used to bring home. And the signature, God, the signature. It was close, but wrong. The way the letters connected the flourish at the end, it was a forgery. A bad one. I folded it back neatly and handed it to her. Thank you for sharing, I said evenly. I think I'll go now. Gasps, confusion. Emily blinked. That's it? You're not going to say anything? Not right now, I replied. This is Leo's day. We can discuss it privately. I kissed my parents on the cheek, ignoring their stunned silence, and walked out. The whispers followed me, buzzing like hornets. By the time I slid into my car and shut the door, the laugh I had been holding in finally burst free. It ripped through me, wild and unstoppable, until tears blurred my vision. Because Emily didn't know the one thing that made her entire lie collapse. Daniel had already taken steps years ago, steps no one but us and his doctor knew about. 2 years before Leo was even conceived, Daniel underwent surgery. A varicocele repair complicated by years of pain. During the procedure, the doctor recommended a vasectomy to prevent recurrence. Daniel agreed. It was final, irreversible. We told no one, not our parents, not our friends. We had endured too many questions about children. This was our secret. So Emily's story, her grand performance, was not just cruel. It was biologically impossible. But that wasn't all. Daniel, practical as ever, had gone further. He had documented everything. Every advance Emily made. Every inappropriate message. Every late-night joke that crossed the line. He even updated his will through proper legal channels, leaving everything to me. He had seen this coming. As I sat in the car, my laughter faded into something else, grief tangled with awe. Even in death, Daniel was protecting me. He had built a shield I hadn't realized I would need. Emily thought she had cornered me with her forged document, but all she had done was walk straight into a trap she couldn't see. And I knew then I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to expose her, not out of spite, but out of love. For Daniel. For the truth. The next morning I drove straight to the bank. My body felt heavy with exhaustion, but my mind was sharp. I carried a key in my purse that Daniel had given me years earlier, one I had never used until now. For emergencies, he had said at the time. I never imagined the emergency would look like this, my sister, standing in a backyard, waving a fake will. The bank manager knew us well. His expression softened when he saw me. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Carter, he said quietly, leading me into a private viewing room. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as he set the safety deposit box on the table. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the lock. Inside, I found what Daniel had jokingly called our disaster kit, except now it felt like a lifeline. On top was his legitimate will notarized and signed, leaving everything to me. There was no mention of Emily, no mention of Leo, just my name written in his steady hand. Underneath lay a thick folder of medical records, lab results, surgical notes, follow-up tests, confirming the vasectomy Daniel had undergone 2 years before Leo was even conceived. Proof that Emily's story was impossible. There was more. A journal, its leather cover worn at the edges, filled with Daniel's handwriting. Page after page documented every uncomfortable encounter with Emily, the comments, the touches, the unwanted messages. Dates, times, exact quotes. He had recorded everything. And then at the bottom, an envelope with my name written across it. My breath caught as I opened it. My dearest Rachel, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. I can't bear the thought of leaving you to face Emily alone. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know, and I worry that heart will be used against you. So I've prepared these documents to protect you. Use them when the time comes. And remember, this love isn't just about being present. It's about leaving safety behind for the people we care about. I love you. Always, Daniel. The words blurred as tears spilled down my face. I pressed the letter to my chest, aching for the sound of his voice. Even gone, he was still here, shielding me from the chaos he had always known Emily carried inside her. By the time I left the bank, the grief in my chest was still raw, but it was now braided with something else resolve. Emily had staged her little performance. She thought she had set the trap. But the truth was on my side, written in medical records, legal documents, and Daniel's own hand. When I met with James Wilson, Daniel's old mentor and attorney, later that day, his reaction confirmed it. He looked at the forged will Emily had flaunted and shook his head. This is amateur work, he said. The language is wrong. The signature wouldn't survive scrutiny. And with these medical records, her entire claim collapses. Daniel was nothing if not thorough. James leaned back, studying me. Rachel, you have the power to crush this. But before you do, I want you to consider her motive. People rarely commit fraud this bold without desperation behind it. You might be fighting more than greed. You might be fighting survival. That thought chilled me. Greed I could handle. Desperation was harder. Desperation makes people reckless, dangerous. I agreed to hire a private investigator. James recommended a man named Frank Delaney. His task: dig into Emily's life. Find out why she was willing to risk everything on such a brazen lie. And as I handed him the forged will, my stomach tightened. Emily believed she had broken me in front of everyone, but what she didn't know was that her performance had just opened a door. Behind it, the truth waited, and I was ready to let it out. Frank worked quickly. Within days, he called James's office, asking me to come in. I remember the weight in my chest as I walked into that brownstone law office, its walls lined with old legal books and polished wood. Frank was waiting with a folder already open on the table, his expression serious. Rachel, he began, I think you need to see this. He laid out page after page, overdue credit card bills, notices of default medical invoices. Emily was drowning. She had accumulated more than $75,000 in debt. Her credit score was a wreck, and just last week her landlord had filed an eviction notice. 4 months of unpaid rent. She had until the end of the month to leave or be forced out. But that wasn't all. Tyler, the father she had named at Leo's birth, had left months earlier. He'd moved to Seattle with another woman. The so-called child support he sent was barely $200 a month, and even that was irregular. Emily was alone, broke, and cornered. And then Frank dropped the final bomb text messages. He slid them across the table, and my stomach clenched as I read Emily's words. To her friend Jenna, she had written, Daniel's death is tragic, but maybe it's finally my chance. That house is worth at least $800,000 now. If I play this right, I'll get my share. Dave is helping with the will. He found a sample of Daniel's signature online. Bridget has always been the golden child. Time for me to take what's mine. I nearly gagged. The cruelty, the calculation. This wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion. It was premeditated fraud. She had planned to use my husband's death, the worst moment of my life, as her opportunity to climb out of her mess. James leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. She forged a legal document, Rachel. That's a felony. We could press charges right now. I stared at the pages, bile rising in my throat. But Leo, I whispered. He's innocent. Frank nodded grimly. Tyler isn't someone you want near that child either. He's got domestic violence charges from a past relationship. He also owes child support for another kid in New Hampshire. Emily may be unstable, but Tyler is dangerous. I pressed my hands against my face, fighting the storm inside me. My sister wasn't just desperate, she was willing to destroy Daniel's name, our marriage, my life, just to escape her own failures. And she was dragging her child into the fire with her. James broke the silence. You have two paths. One, we take this to court. She'll face criminal charges. She could go to prison. Or two, you confront her privately. Show her what you have. Force her to retract her claim, and if you choose, negotiate some arrangement for Leo. I sat there staring at Daniel's journal, his medical records, the forged will, the texts. My hands shook. The fury burned hot, but beneath it was sorrow. Emily wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my enemy. Yet, in that moment, I remembered Daniel's letter. You have the biggest heart, and I worry it will be used against you. He was right. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice and protection. For me, for Leo, for Daniel's memory. So I made my choice. I would confront Emily myself. Not with rage, not with humiliation in front of others, but with the truth. I would let her see the walls closing in every piece of evidence laid out before her, and then she would have to decide, confess and seek help, or face the law. Because one thing was certain, she wasn't taking my house, my husband's honor, or my peace. Not now, not ever. What would you have done? Would you drag your own sister to court, or give her one last chance to make things right? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see how I confronted her face to face with everything on the line, make sure to subscribe. The showdown is coming, and it changes everything. I spent the night after Frank's revelations pacing the living room. Every corner of the house Daniel and I had built together, whispered with memories, our laughter while painting walls, the arguments over furniture, the quiet evenings when we'd finally collapse onto the porch swing. And now, all of it was under threat from my own sister's lies. By morning, my decision was set. I wasn't going to drag her straight into court, not yet. I wanted to look her in the eye, to hear her admit what she had done. And I wanted her to know that I wasn't powerless, that Daniel had seen this coming and had armed me with truth. I called Emily. My voice was steady, though my heart hammered. We need to talk about the will. Come to my house tomorrow afternoon. Just you leave Leo with a babysitter. There was a pause on the other end, then a smug tone. I knew you'd come around. I'll be there at 2. The next day I prepared everything. On the coffee table I placed a recorder. James had warned me Massachusetts required both parties' consent to record, so I planned to ask her up front. Next to it I arranged the documents, Daniel's notarized will, his medical records, the copies of her text messages, and Frank's full report. Each sheet of paper was a brick in the wall closing in around her. At exactly 2 o'clock the doorbell rang. Emily walked in confidently, dressed in a new blouse, her chin high. She thought she had already won. Come in, I said, gesturing to the chairs set across from each other. Before we start, I want to record this conversation. That way we both have a record of what's said. She hesitated for half a second, then waved a hand. Fine, whatever makes you comfortable. I pressed record, stating the date and time. Then I leaned back. Tell me your story, Emily. I want to hear exactly what you claim happened between you and Daniel. Her eyes gleamed as she launched into her script. She spoke of secret hotel meetings downtown, of whispered confessions of unhappiness in my marriage, of a bond that led to Leo's conception. Her voice was steady, rehearsed, like a bad actress reading from a play. I let her finish. Then I began asking questions. Which hotel? What room? What nights of the week? What did Daniel order from room service? What side of the bed did he use? Her answers faltered. She stammered, contradicted herself, grew defensive. Why does it matter? The point is, Leo is Daniel's and the will proves it. I slid the first folder across the table. Actually, it doesn't. These are Daniel's medical records. 2 years before Leo was born, he had a vasectomy. successful, permanent. It was physically impossible for him to father a child after that. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she scanned the papers. "These could be fake," she whispered. "They're not. His doctor is prepared to testify, and that's not all." I pulled out the notarized will. This is Daniel's actual will, properly filed, witnessed by attorneys. It leaves everything to me. There is no mention of Leo. Emily's composure cracked. Her voice rose. "Then he must have changed it after the one I have is more recent." I met her gaze. "The one you have is a forgery. That's a felony punishable by prison time, and James Wilson has already confirmed it wouldn't hold up in court." Finally, I laid down the last pieces, Daniel's journal documenting her advances, Frank's report revealing her debt, her eviction notice, Tyler's abandonment, and the text messages, her own words, planning to use Daniel's death to steal my house. For the first time, Emily was silent. Her hands shook. Tears welled in her eyes, not the theatrical kind she used on our parents, but raw, broken sobs. "I didn't know what else to do," she choked out. "I'm drowning. I have nothing. I thought this was my only chance." And in that moment, I realized the truth. She wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. Desperation had driven her to destroy the last threads of trust between us. Emily's sobs echoed in my living room, bouncing off the walls Daniel and I had painted together. Her tears soaked into her sleeve as she buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I almost saw the little sister I used to protect, when she scraped her knees, the one who clung to me during thunderstorms. But then I remembered the forged will, the lies she had rehearsed, the way she had stood at Leo's birthday party and announced to the world that my husband had betrayed me. I couldn't let myself forget that. "You weren't just desperate," I said slowly, leaning forward. "You were willing to destroy Daniel's reputation. You told people he cheated. You tried to take half of what we built together. That isn't just desperation, Emily. That's cruelty." Her head snapped up, anger flashing through the tears. "You don't understand. You have everything, Rachel. The house, the business, everyone's respect. And me, I'm a single mother with $75,000 in debt and an eviction notice. Leo needs surgery and Tyler abandoned us. I did what I had to do." I let her words hang in the air, heavy and bitter. "What you had to do," I repeated, "was lie, forge a legal document, accuse your dead brother-in-law of an affair he never had. And for what money?" Emily slammed her palm on the table. "For survival," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You'll never know what it feels like to wake up every morning wondering how you'll feed your kid. You'll never know the terror of a landlord threatening to throw you on the street." Her fury filled the room, but it didn't erase the evidence stacked between us. I waited for her to fall silent, then pushed the papers toward her one by one. "These medical records make your claim impossible. The vasectomy happened 2 years before Leo's birth. The notarized will proves Daniel left everything to me. The text messages show you plotted this fraud weeks in advance. And Daniel's journal," I tapped the leather cover, "shows every time you crossed a line with him. He saw you for what you were, Emily. And he prepared for this." She slumped in her chair, the fight draining out of her. "I never touched him," she whispered. "Not really. I tried once. He shut me down. He was loyal to you, always." The admission stung, even though I already knew it was true. She had wanted him, and when she couldn't have him, she tried to steal from him in death. I turned off the recorder and sat back. "You know I could press charges. Forgery, fraud, they'd lock you up. You'd lose Leo. Is that what you want?" Her eyes widened in panic. "No, please, don't do that. I'll do anything. Just don't take him from me." I studied her face, blotchy and wet, her bravado stripped away. For the first time, I saw the raw fear beneath the arrogance. And though anger still burned in me, compassion tugged at the edges. Not for her, but for Leo. That boy was innocent. He deserved stability, care, a future untainted by his mother's mistakes. "I'll make you a deal," I said finally, my voice firm. "You will confess. You will tell the truth to our parents, to anyone who heard your lie. You will apologize for dragging Daniel's name through the mud. In return, I won't press charges. Instead, I'll set up a trust for Leo, his education, his medical bills. But there will be conditions, therapy, financial counseling, a steady job, and I will be part of his life to make sure he's cared for." Emily blinked at me, stunned. "Why would you help me after what I did?" "Not for you," I replied coldly. "For Leo. And because Daniel would have wanted me to protect his nephew, even if his mother tried to destroy us." Her shoulders sagged. Slowly she nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." I exhaled, the tension easing only slightly. Then tomorrow we go to James Wilson and put it in writing. And next week at dinner with Mom and Dad, you tell them everything. Emily wiped her face, her voice small. I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything, for always competing, for never being the sister you deserved. I wanted to believe her, but trust once shattered doesn't rebuild overnight. The Saturday family dinner was set for 7 o'clock. I spent the entire day with a knot in my stomach replaying Emily's trembling promise over and over. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. Part of me doubted she'd go through with it. Another part feared she'd twist the truth again, spinning sympathy the way she always had. My parents arrived first, my mother clutching a casserole dish like a peace offering. I don't know why Emily says you're forcing her into some family meeting, she murmured nervously, setting the dish on my counter. But I hope this isn't going to turn into a fight. I gave her a tight smile. It won't be a fight. It will be the truth. By the time Emily walked in, pale and subdued, my father was pacing by the dining table. The recorder sat in the center, just as James Wilson had advised. Everyone took their seats, the clink of silverware the only sound in the heavy silence. I cleared my throat. Thank you all for coming. Tonight Emily has something important to share. I turned to her, my eyes steady. Go ahead. For a moment she stared at her plate. Then she inhaled shakily. I lied. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo isn't Daniel's son. Daniel and I never had an affair. I forged the will I showed at the birthday party. The words hung in the air like a bomb. My parents froze their faces, pale with shock. Why, my father demanded, his voice tight. Why would you do something so destructive? Emily's shoulders slumped as she explained. The debt, the eviction notice, Tyler's abandonment, Leo's medical bills. She spoke of the fear, the exhaustion, the desperation. Her voice gained strength as she admitted to plotting the scheme, even detailing how her friend had helped her forge Daniel's signature. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, why didn't you just come to us for help? You didn't need to invent such terrible lies. Emily's expression hardened. Would you have given me $400,000 because that's what I wanted? Half of Rachel's house. That was the plan. My father shook his head, his voice rising. We couldn't give you that kind of money, but we would have helped with rent, with groceries. Anything but this. Do you realize what you've done to your sister, to Daniel's memory? Emily glanced at me, her eyes wet. Rachel's already made it clear. She could press charges if she wanted to. My mother turned to me quickly, alarmed. You wouldn't do that, would you? She's your sister. She has Leo to think about. I clenched my fists, heat rising in my chest. And what about me? I'm family too. I just buried my husband, and instead of support, Emily tried to paint him as a cheater and rob me blind. Where was your concern for me when she humiliated me in front of everyone? The room went still. My father shifted uncomfortably, his gaze falling to the table. Of course we care about you, Rachel, but Emily has always needed more help. And whose fault is that I shot back? You've bailed her out her whole life, and she's never faced consequences. Maybe if you had, she wouldn't have escalated to crimes. To my shock, Emily nodded slowly. She's right. You always made excuses for me, Mom. You thought you were protecting me, but you weren't. You made me believe I could do whatever I wanted. My parents stared at her, stunned. For once, she wasn't deflecting. She was admitting it. I took a deep breath. Here's what happens now. I won't press charges, but only under strict conditions. Emily has agreed to a legal contract. I will set up a trust for Leo's education and medical care. In return, she will go to therapy, attend financial counseling, hold a steady job, and allow me to be part of Leo's life. If she breaks any of these terms, the support ends immediately. My father exhaled, relief washing over him. That's generous, Rachel. After everything, that's more than she deserves. Emily's voice was small. It is more than I deserve, but I'll do it. My mother dabbed her eyes, forcing a smile. Then this can be the start of healing. Family should stick together. I shook my head. Not like before. There will be boundaries, real ones. Emily and I will never be what we once were, but I'll be there for Leo. That's where this ends. The rest of the meal was quiet, the tension lingering in the air. But one thing was clear, our family would never be the same again. Why, have you ever watched the truth finally tear through years of excuses? It's powerful, but it's also painful. Tell me your experience in the comments, and subscribe if you want to see what came after this confession. Because Emily's transformation and what Daniel left behind shaped the future in ways I couldn't have imagined. The days after that dinner felt like walking across thin ice, each step careful, every sound magnified. My parents tried to act as though Emily's confession had closed the wound, but I knew better. Trust does not return with a single apology. It must be rebuilt brick by brick, and sometimes the foundation is too cracked to hold anything at all. Emily began attending therapy and financial counseling as agreed. For the first time in her life, she didn't brush off responsibility with a laugh or an excuse. Still, I kept my distance. Our conversations were short, formal. She asked about paperwork for the trust fund. I answered. She updated me about Leo's medical appointments. I listened. But the warmth of sisterhood was gone. Leo, however, remained my anchor. I took him to the park, to the Children's Museum, even to my studio while I worked. His laughter reminded me why I had made the choice not to press charges. He was innocent, a child born into chaos, and he deserved better. My parents struggled with the boundaries I had set. My mother especially wanted to fix everything, to host family dinners as if nothing had happened. She called me pleading, "Rachel, she's your sister. Don't let this tear you apart." But I stood firm. Being family doesn't mean enabling lies. What Emily did was abusive. She used my grief like a weapon. That has consequences. It was hard saying those words to my mother, but it was harder watching her flinch, as if hearing for the first time how deeply Emily's choices had cut me. My father, though quieter, surprised me. After one strained dinner, he hugged me tightly before leaving and whispered, "I'm proud of you." Daniel would be too. Those words stayed with me, because I wasn't just protecting myself, I was honoring Daniel. He had left me the tools to fight, but also the wisdom to choose compassion when possible. He would never have wanted Leo to suffer for Emily's sins. Slowly, I found strength outside the family. I joined a grief support group, 12 strangers bound together by loss. We met weekly in a church basement with coffee that tasted like ash, but conversations that healed. We shared stories of birthdays spent alone, of empty chairs at dinner tables, of nights when the silence was unbearable. And in those voices I found comfort. They understood in ways my own parents couldn't. 3 months after confronting Emily, I founded the Daniel Carter Foundation for Legal Education, offering scholarships to underprivileged law students. It was my way of turning Daniel's legacy into light for others. Seeing those students bright-eyed, ambitious, grateful, reminded me that something good could still grow from tragedy. Friends, too, stepped in where family faltered. Daniel's former colleagues invited me to dinners, making sure I wasn't isolated. My college roommate flew in monthly just to sit with me through the long weekends. And then there was Michael, a professor of ethics I met at a fundraiser. He was kind, thoughtful, never pushing, only listening. We began as friends, coffee, after meetings, then dinners. It was nothing like the whirlwind with Daniel. Slower, softer, and that was okay. One afternoon, standing in the garden, Daniel and I had once dreamed would hold children's laughter. I realized something. Betrayal does not erase love. Lies do not erase truth. And grief, though it bends us, does not break us forever. Emily thought she had stolen my foundation. But in trying to shatter me, she had forced me to build something stronger, on boundaries, on honesty, on resilience. 1 year after Daniel's death, I stood in the garden behind our Beacon Hill house, watching daffodils push through the soil. Daniel had planted them the fall before he died, and now they bloomed in brilliant yellow against the fresh spring grass. Seeing them felt like a message across time. His hands had placed them there, never knowing he wouldn't live to see them flower. So much had changed in that single year. The trust fund I created for Leo was already covering his medical needs and setting aside money for his future education. His heart condition, while still requiring care, had improved. He was growing into a curious, bright-eyed toddler who laughed with abandon whenever I visited. Emily surprised everyone. For once, she followed through. 6 months of therapy helped her confront the jealousy and self-sabotage that had defined her life. She found a steady job as an office manager at a dental practice, mundane work by her old standards, but stable and respectable. She showed up on time, paid her rent, and for the first time didn't rely on bailouts. Our relationship didn't transform into sisterly closeness. It remained formal, cautious, but there was peace. I saw Leo regularly, took him to the park, read him bedtime stories, and gave him the love Emily still struggled to show consistently. That was enough. My parents had the hardest time adjusting. My mother mourned the illusion of a perfect family, clinging to the hope we'd all gather at Christmas, as though nothing had happened. But over time, she accepted the new reality that boundaries were not cruelty, they were survival. My father, quieter, as always, respected my stance. He understood the cost of betrayal and admired that I'd chosen strength over silence. And me, I wasn't the same woman I'd been before. The grief group became my lifeline. 12 strangers became friends who understood the jagged edges of loss. We leaned on each other, celebrated small victories, and cried without shame. They taught me that healing wasn't linear. It came in waves, sometimes fierce, sometimes gentle. The Daniel Carter Foundation grew beyond what I'd imagined. Watching young law students from struggling backgrounds receive scholarships in Daniel's name gave me purpose. His legacy wasn't just mine to hold, it was theirs to carry forward. Each acceptance letter felt like proof that love doesn't die with the body. It multiplies if you give it room. And then there was Michael. At first just coffee, then quiet dinners. He never tried to fill Daniel's place. Instead, he honored it. He listened when I talked about Daniel. He understood that love could expand without erasing what came before. Slowly, carefully, I let myself believe in the possibility of companionship again. Standing in that garden, I whispered into the spring air. You couldn't have known what Emily would try after you were gone, but you prepared me. You protected me even from beyond. And I realized that was Daniel's last gift. Not just the documents in the safety deposit box, but the lesson embedded in them. Preparation is love. Boundaries are love. Honesty is love. Emily's betrayal had nearly broken me, but it forced me to build a stronger life, one rooted in truth, not appearances. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the wound never happened. It means choosing not to let the wound define you. The daffodils swayed in the breeze, resilient after the long winter. And I thought maybe I was like them, different than before, scarred by the cold but still blooming. If you've carried grief or betrayal and found a way to keep going, share your story below. Someone else may need to hear it. And if this journey spoke to you, subscribe, because stories like this aren't just about pain. They're about survival, love, and the power to rise again. Come with me to the next chapter, where we'll explore another tale of family betrayal and resilience that might just change how you see your own life. Grief, betrayal, forgiveness. These are words we often hear, but rarely live through in their rawest form. For me, they became more than words. They became the map of my last year. Losing Daniel broke me in ways I didn't know I could break. Facing Emily's lies tested me in ways I didn't know I could endure, but somehow I'm still here. I've learned that healing isn't about erasing the scars. It's about carrying them with grace. It's about letting them remind you of your strength, not your weakness. Daniel once told me that love doesn't end, it transforms. At the time, I thought it was just something people say when they're trying to soften reality. But now, standing in the quiet of our garden, I know he was right. His love protects me still, not in the way I imagined, but in the foresight he left, the documents he prepared, the lessons he embedded into my life. Emily's betrayal will never disappear. Some wounds never do, but I've chosen not to let it define me. Instead, I let it teach me. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that you choose when and if to open. Mercy is not weakness. It's strength wielded with control. And forgiveness? Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means freedom from anger, from bitterness, from being chained to someone else's choices. As the seasons turn and the daffodils bloom again, I carry Daniel's voice with me. I carry the laughter of Leo, who deserves a future brighter than the mistakes of his parents. And I carry my own resilience, the quiet truth that I am stronger now than I ever thought I could be. And maybe that's the real story. Not just survival, but transformation.